Well, good morning, everyone. I hope, first of all, thank you for the invite, Anastasia, and I hope it's been meaningful and you've learned stuff this morning, because I know I certainly have. And so Marina Levina back there, she's one of our chief data scientists and architects. So we're going to be talking about predictive analytics, which she was intimately involved with. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of information about the company, because most people, you say Dell, and people think about laptops, right? They think about the ad going like, dude, you're getting the Dell. But Dell actually consists of 7 different companies, which you have Dell EMC, which is where Marina and I both belong to. You'll see how it's structured. We have the Pivotal Group that's doing a lot of the open source and cloud type of initiatives. RSA and SecureWorks from a security standpoint. VirtuStream from a cloud standpoint, and VMware. So there's many different brands that make up what's called Dell Technologies. Oh, and the top one up there, that was last year's revenue. Looks like, don't take any of these numbers verbatim, but it looks like we're probably in a pretty good position to break 90 billion this year. So we continue to grow even after the post-acquisition. And this, where I'm going to spend like 30 seconds on, Marina and I belong to what's called the Infrastructure Solutions Group. So when they brought Dell and EMC together, Dell EMC, the ISG group, now covers servers, networking, primary storage, data protection, hyperconverged and converged infrastructure. So you're going to be seeing a lot of what we're talking about from that perspective. And you still have folks like the CSG group, which is a consumer group, as sort of the laptop, the servers and printers for home and still. So just to give you some idea. So I'm not going to spend more than about 30 seconds on this, but we often get asked a question. What is your CI stack? And so we use a number of things. Where did Mike go? There he is. So we orchestrated SFDC in a little bit different way. We actually put in competitive fields so that when it reaches like a stage 3 deal, our reps have to put in who is the competitor, both from a primary and secondary standpoint. And if you think about that, that allows us to mine that data over time. And we do that through products like Domo and Tableau. We also hook in our competitive portal, which is done by a little startup out of Vancouver called Clue. And that hosts all of our competitive information. We currently have over 60 vendors, competitors listed there, and over 150 individual products. Because some of the larger vendors have multiple products. So that's our competitive portal, and then we work with Wide and Narrow on some of the stuff you're going to be seeing related to predictive analytics. So predictive analytics is kind of an interesting topic, and this is actually a shorter version of a much longer version, like some of my colleagues up here today. So predictive analytics has a really interesting connotation, and that is, if you look at some of the graphics available for predictive analytics, boy, it sure looks simple, right? All you've got is a little bit of regression analysis, some text analysis, apply some ML, machine learning and AI to it, do some classification, and you've got predictive analytics. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. It's actually quite difficult. And it also depends upon your perspective. So from a predictive standpoint, it might be like Carrie Mathison on Homeland, right? You've got all this stuff up on the walls trying to make sense of it. And from other people, they think, well, it's got to be like Minority Report. I should just be able to move this stuff around and get answers. That's a cartoon related to the Minority Report. But if you look at some of the publications out there from the analysts, like Gartner Group, they'll say things like this. Well, this is their take on the predictive analytics. And you see it hit the peak of inflated expectations, went through the trough of disillusionment, and then the slope of enlightenment and plateau. Well, it's been there for, 5 years? So what does Gartner do? Oh, let's just go back to the top of the curve, right? It's got to hit sometime. But, predictive is a fairly difficult thing to do. So what does this mean? Well, if you're doing it successfully, you're going to say it tastes great and it's less filling. If you're having problems with it, this is your brain on drugs. It's a real problem because it isn't easy. People do this because of the potential promise of predictive analytics. This came from the most recent issue of IEEE Spectrum, and this talks about how this product called Sepsis Watch consists of 50,000 patient records and more than 32 million data points. That alone should tell you that while this product is successful in being rolled out to hospitals, you got a lot of data, and you have to understand that. You have to understand the classification, the taxonomy, what the data means, and so it's not simple. As a matter of fact, that's why a lot of people are going to IBM Watson, is to help aid them in understanding this type of data. Healthcare probably is the most predominant one, and Bill, I'll use IBM's flagship here. You know, and this goes through different layers of enlightenment, if you will. We start off with information layers, what's happening, what's going on. Then you get to the prescriptive side, which really talks about, you know, are there gaps in healthcare, what happened, when, where, and why, how much does it cost. And then you start getting to the predictive piece. And that's where you're trying to understand what's going to happen. And that's where it becomes difficult because you have to have all that data and get pretty good at saying, okay, based upon what we're seeing, it means this is going to happen. That's where the predictive side starts getting really harried. But it can be done. Let's see, is this going? There we go. Prescriptive. That's, again, the next layer. I don't think many of us are there yet, but there are a few. And then cognitive, which is saying it's kind of got the AI flavor to it, or it can help you anticipate and manage. So there's a lot of potential there. If you look at some of the other industries, employee retention is another one. Workday banks pretty heavily on this. Can we keep our most expensive and loyal and important employees? Who are they? What do they do? And how do we place a value on that? How do we keep retention among those employees? And then here's some other areas where the predictive side can come into, or proactive side, if you will. Fraud detection, you know, all the credit card companies are doing that. Visa, American Express, they all have programs that are doing this right now. As a matter of fact, you know, given the amount of cybercrime, a lot of those companies have some very important programs going on right now. Crime reduction, the graph over on the right side is saying, can we identify based upon historical information, demographics, propensity for crime, can we anticipate where we're going to need to deploy those resources? Aircraft maintenance, of course, GE, you know, they collect a ton of telemetric data. Well, that was easy for me to say, right? Consumer marketing, you know, that's where you're going into the store and you're saying, well, okay, we know that from data, if the customer's going to buy 3 cans of soup, if we put a 4-pack at the end cap, they'll buy that. That's consumer marketing. Insurance actuaries, I actually have a neighbor who is an expert in insurance actuaries. And he was able to sell his company for, as one of my friends calls it, stupid money. I mean, he just buys all sorts of toys now, and I wish I were able to enjoy that too. Mortgage risk, and of course, credit score analysis. So there's a whole plethora of potential applications for this. The 2 things are, what you're really trying to do is reduce risk to the business while increasing money. It's a pretty simple game, but it's very hard to get to it. So I'm going to give you an example, and how many of you are familiar with like the Gartner Magic Quadrant in this room? Yeah, the Magic Quadrant of death. Anyway, what that is it's an example of tracking events over time. And so this is kind of a prelude to what Marina and her team has developed within Dell EMC. So I'll go ahead and get that going, and then you'll kind of see the correlation between the MQ and this time tracking.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before, animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health, life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up, Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. But this really shows what you're seeing with the Gartner Magic Quadrant. It's tracking this over time, and then if you apply a predictive factor based upon keywords, industry trends, and whatnot, that's what Marina's now going to talk to you about, what we've done in terms of a internal proof of concept. So with that, Marina Levina.
Thank you. I realize that the bar is pretty high right now. I cannot beat the BBC team with all that staging, and I also stand between you and lunch. So I try to be efficient. Thank you very much again. And this is a proof of concept. This is actually real. I don't think we quite reached the predictive phase yet. I mean, maybe I'm being modest, but we are striving for a prediction. But we've been able to determine some trends based on publicly available data. We call this project Common Crawl project, and this is based on the Common Crawl data that is situated in AWS, Amazon Web Services. What it is, it's open data. It's available to everybody. Everybody can use it. It's a huge amount of data. It's in petabytes. The Common Crawl basically goes out on the web and scrapes the web content once a month and loads it up in the S3 simple storage bucket on AWS. So what we're trying to do with that open data source, we were trying, I think it was in one of the presentations today, we were trying to basically get into the head of our competition in terms of determining their next move or anticipating their next move. For that reason, we were looking at the transitions of technology, maybe new words that were coming out of their blogs or their domain pages, forums, what technologies are gaining traction, what is going on with our competition. This is what we were trying to see. And that was interesting because we saw, for example, that Huawei we know that they are selling servers, they are selling phone devices, but we did not anticipate that they would be going into the data center technology and doing transformation. And this is part of their business model now. Moreover, based on our research, Huawei is now trying to go on the cloud, and they actually trying to acquire this piece of a business as well. That with this proof of concept in this project, we were able to see that Huawei is moving away from being telco and into something else. So what did we do exactly? What was the process? As I mentioned, this is what we call the Common Crawl project. First, we downloaded the data, which was a whole different story. And I have a slide later on which talks about the difficulties that we were facing in terms of downloading the data, because as I mentioned before, it's in petabytes. And you cannot dump the data, the content, it's just dump it. You have to go through index download, and then you have to query the index download, and then it will be well, anyway, it may be too technical. So this is basically the process of that exercise, which took us nearly 9 months, I would say, to figure out how to actually do it. And talking about, gathering data, the data was gathered, it was there. We didn't need to get it, but that was a part of analysis and part of the automation, if you will, or exploration with new technology, and playing in the sandbox maybe sometimes, maybe not playing, sometimes crying in the sandbox, but yes, it was there as well. So that's a process of downloading this painful data. Then we needed to pre-process the data with the help of our SMEs, and luckily people who were doing that were SMEs, so it was easy for us to create the lists of words that we need to concentrate on and remove the irrelevant words and create the words that we will be concentrating on, such as n-grams, bigrams, or whatever permutation we would be looking at, depending on a use case. And then the last stage is data visualization part, which is last stage, but that actually is just the beginning of the whole other analysis portion of that project. So This is more of the architecture, again, the painful situation about downloading the data and how the data size reduces once you scrape the irrelevant content, or the content that was irrelevant to us, I should say, the HTML tags, the stop words and other things, and you need to tag the data because it comes as a dump. So you have to go through competitor domains and tag them appropriately. You need to keep the dates, not throw everything away. So keep relevant things, don't throw irrelevant things out. So reduce the data size as you proceed, and finally go into the visual part. Once you see what you can get, then you can try to come up with a relevant, actionable business case use, which in our case we were able to determine how we could make it interesting for our sales and sales strategy and marketing people. This is compared to what you just seen from BBC. Of course, it doesn't look as pretty, but this is real. This is what we were getting by doing this, the common crawl scraping. And this is a real result. This is what we got. And this is how we were able to see that this is clearly something brewing up with this particular competitor using this particular competitor domains data. And basically, that's what made us think that we were able to find these trends, maybe come up with this radar list for the trends, which I love this idea from IBM. I think it's great, and monitor it that way. Also, next step would be also monitor the outliers, not in that particular visualization, but in a different way. But the outliers are important. I completely agree with that, because they would show something, again, maybe a new upcoming trend, maybe something dying off, but this is in the next step. This is a lesson learned, as I promised. There are some, budgetary questions, of course. All these workloads are compute intensive, so they are expensive to perform. So we have to always ask ourselves, how are we using the resources? What is important for us? Are we saving money? Are we using too much of our budget on the computational resources? Which instances to use? So it's not just, you become not just the person who is doing the analysis. All of a sudden, you have to be a financier, because you have to take into consideration your budgeting issue as well. So, but luckily, Amazon has things such as spot instances, which means that when people are not using their compute resources that they bought, they go on the market and they sell them. So if anybody's interested, you can actually do that, and that can be pretty cheap. As I mentioned, we work with a very large data set, and it takes time, and it's very cumbersome, and sometimes it takes days to download the data from one domain. And that's what it is. You just have to be patient. And sometimes you realize you might not be downloading the right thing, and then you have to do it over again. So it takes time to figure that out. But what we also realized that analyzing the log files even from our billing was very helpful. We call it the post-mortem situation that help us to realize where we could have done better, what we could have done better in terms of using resources, or maybe using different instances, or maybe using some different strategies for extraction. So we've noticed a couple of things, such as spiky data on a monthly basis. We don't have an explanation for that. We've noticed that different competitors have different size of the data, which is we would expect that. We think that IBM should have more data than probably, I don't know, Zerto, let's say. So yeah, it's good. And also what we've noticed that Common Crawl has been around for since over 10 years, I think. And they've been also changing data formats, and that's been also affecting our ability to analyze the data. And also when the companies get bought or they change their names, such as HP, HPE, it does not get reflected there. So some data get lost, some data doesn't get accounted for. So yes, it was a journey, and we are still on that journey. And I'm happy that I can even give you 10 minutes back.
Yeah, I guess the thing is, we found out that this is so we're starting part 2 of the journey. We're actually starting to apply the engine that Marina and team have created to our own SFDC information. So we collect win-loss codes and reasons. And so we're able to create those word bubbles and then also track that over time to see how they're changing. So it gives us some great insights into our own business as well. So we're learning how to monetize based upon what we're able to do. But certainly the proof of concept shows the potential behind this, and we're going to keep making refinements to the algorithms and where we're going with it. So with that, sir?
That was excellent, Jay.